This video is entitled The Greatest Deception in the World. It is without a doubt that there is a lot of deception happening in this world. There is deception in marketing, in advertising, in gambling, in politics, you name it. There's deception all over the place. This we know. However, the greatest deception that is going on is the deception to continue eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Yeah. Because when people continue to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it separates them. It separates people from people when we do that, because there's an endless amount of knowledge about good and evil to feed on that makes one person better than another person ad infinitum. There can always be somebody better than the other person. Somebody who's good is better than another person's bad. And we can make those judgments infinitely in our minds. This is why there is so much division in the world. This is why there's division between liberal and conservative and Democrat and Republican, and endless divisions, denominations. There's more that I can't think of at the moment. But it's because people find something good and something true, and they recognize that because they're used to doing that and eating from that tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's easy to do that. We can find good things and say this is good and this is true. And then we look at other things and we have not recognized those things as good and or true. And so we camp out on what we believe to be good and true. And we disregard the other things that other people have found to be good and true. And this creates an infinite amount of division. It's called divide and conquer. As well, eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil creates a scenario, especially for religious people. When I say religious people, I mean people of faith, people who believe in God and who attempt to live for Him. It causes them to judge things in their lives and in other people's lives around them as good or bad, without a real knowledge of whether it is good or bad for themselves or for that other person, because we're simply making those judgments based upon our base of knowledge rather than a true depth or understanding of whether it really is good for us or good for that person, or bad for us or bad for that person. That kind of knowledge, that real knowledge, only comes from God, from His Spirit, and from Christ Himself. That's why they are the path to eat from the tree of life. When I say eat, I mean it's a metaphorical term. Glad I get the chance to clear this up because I've talked about this a lot. But it's a term that just means partaking of spiritually, mentally, as our for our conscious state of being. I'm not trying to sound too deep, I'm just trying to explain it in very practical terms. So when we do that, and we judge these things in our lives or in others' lives around us as either good for us, or good for others, or bad for us, or bad for others, which constantly goes on all over the place, we elevate ourselves above others in our minds, and we divide ourselves from each other. This has caused the division of the human race for as long as the human race has been around. And also what happens for people of faith when they do that, it causes them to miss the real battle. So we judge, let's say, smoking. Somebody smokes, and we all know it's bad for our bodies, and so we go, oh, smoking is wrong, and we need to stop it. But the real issue is that smoking is just a action or a behavior that is done as a result of underlying issues that are deeper down inside the person. But when we eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we simply say, oh, that is a bad thing, and so we must stop it, which then causes us to try in our own strength to stop doing that. That's a dead-end road, because there's no power there to do that. Ask anybody who's tried to stop smoking or drinking or overeating or whatever, name it. And I understand that sometimes people do stop. I've known people who have. But in your own strength, in our own strength, apart from God, it's extremely difficult to do. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very difficult. Most people in the world find it extremely difficult. So, the escape from that deception of eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is to go to God, who knows the reality of the situation. Again, the deception is simply seeing with our paradigm of knowledge of what is good and bad. That's eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and making those judgments in our own lives and in the lives of others. Instead of having the real knowledge of what is really going on deep inside the person. That is the tree of life. So that's how that deception, eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, plays out in many people who are people of faith. So, these are only two of the ways that deception affects people. But it's a huge thing. Anywhere you look in life, you can see the separation between people. It's not difficult to see. You can see it all over the internet. People judging each other. People saying, oh, this person's wrong. Oh, this person's wrong, and telling us why. On this channel, I'm attempting to avoid that, because I want to illustrate, by the grace of God alone, I want to illustrate and live the difference. Eating from the tree of life, and again, I have to stop here and say, you know what, this is what God himself has taught me. I claim no credit here. This is not me being smart. This is God's truth. But eating from the tree of life is the way off of eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that simply means, these are metaphors, right? There's not a literal tree out there that I'm aware of that we can go eat. I'm aware of, yeah. So eating, partaking mentally and spiritually of life, real life, is going to God, because God is the source of all life, and Christ is the source of all life, and the Holy Spirit is the source of all